want to share a bit about Yogananda's soul pilgrimage to mastery. Once a student was talking to Paramahansa Ji and I think basically complaining to him that, he just didn't know how he could become steadfast, how he could persevere on the spiritual path. And Yogananda told him to recognize that God, the omnipresent divine reality, is not distant but always near. In other words, you're always being supported. So he told the student, I see God everywhere, all the time. And the student replied, well, of course, that's easy for you because you're a master. And because Yogananda was a master, he said, so how do you think I became one? He said, all souls are equal. The only difference between you and me is that I made the effort. So what was the effort? We'll look at that a little bit today. We find the clues, of course, in his seminal work, Autobiography of a Yogi. As Reverend Sundari mentioned, this year is the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the publication of that work. It came out in 1946, which I will tell you is one of my favorite years. Of course, Autobiography of a Yogi showed up, big thing. 1946 in Brooklyn, New York, a little baby boy named Michael, who would later become a Marnat, get on the yoga path and be my husband, showed up on the planet. And also I should mention that 1946 was the beginning of the Golden State Warriors. So just the spectrum, of 1946, things that were going on, which I also should mention before I got here. So Yogananda's work, Autobiography of a Yogi, of course, has opened the hearts and minds of millions of souls to the vision of a spiritually awakened life and a peaceful world, the possibility of a peaceful world made possible by people's experience of self and God realization. So as we celebrate this anniversary, I want to look at some themes from the autobiography that we see. Kriya Yoga, of course, discipleship, and mastery. The path, the way, and the goal. Kriya Yoga, discipleship, and mastery. Yogananda embodied and exemplified all three for us, and they are integral to one another. Kriya Yoga, most of you are familiar, but for those who are new, is a spiritual path of self and God realization. Yoga simply means conscious union of the individual self with the cosmic self, becoming aware of the truth of what we are and what God is. And Kriya means action, so it's what we do on the spiritual path to experience that reality of our being and to live in harmony with the infinite. So Kriya Yoga. Discipleship, disciple is a word in English that comes from the Latin discere, to learn. A disciple is a learner. One who approaches life with the intention to learn from it. That's the key to being a spiritual disciple. In life, and we're open to learning and growing. There are many ways, of course, that we can approach life. I think the most common approach is to see what we can get from it. Try to figure out how to control it. see how we can use life to accomplish something or to be successful. Sometimes we approach life, of course, wanting to enjoy it. Nothing wrong with that. Or sometimes hoping we just get through it. Or to experience life, to understand it, to serve it. There's all of these different ways that we can approach life primarily. And I think it brings up a good question for us to ask ourselves, which is, what is my primary approach to life? What is my primary approach to life? How am I approaching being here? What is it about for me? Because that approach, of course, colors our everyday experience of life. Disciples, spiritual disciples, are primarily interested in spiritual awakening. We know that's what we're here for. And we want to learn how to cooperate with the infinite and how to realize our divine, our highest potential, so that we can do what we're here to do. We want to know the truth. We want to know what absolute reality is, what God is, who we are. And then we want to know how to live skillfully in harmony with divine guidance, how to live in the highest way, how to become supremely happy and free while we're at it. Does that sound good? I think, what I've noticed is that when we approach life as a disciple, as a learner, wanting to grow along spiritual lines, life becomes so much sweeter, so much easier, so much more meaningful. Life all of a sudden becomes supportive, and we can be open with the soul's strength and let go of the ego's defensive armor. We become, our life is in partnership with the infinite. And we walk through life knowing that life is conspiring to support us. And our role as disciples is to figure out how that's happening and how we can cooperate with it. So life doesn't have to be ever new struggle. Life can be, as Paramahansa Yogananda noted, ever new joy. But it has to do with our approach to life. It has to do with, what we're bringing forth. So when we read Autobiography of a Yogi, we can see that Yogananda's life was shaped, early on by the teachings of Kriya Yoga. His parents were devout disciples. We can also see his development as a disciple and how important that was to his spiritual unfoldment. Many read the Autobiography of a Yogi and primarily see the stories of the miracles, through his meetings with saints and sages and various accomplished yogis, usually scratching their head, not knowing what to make of these things. And others are intrigued by the meditation experiences that Yogananda had and described, and also the way he introduces the path and the practices of Kriya Yoga. All that is there in Autobiography of a Yogi. But I also see it as a profound teaching on discipleship. If you look at it in that way, you'll see discipleship is woven all through the book as an essential component of the soul journey to mastery. So even though, Yogananda learned Kriya Yoga from his father, who was a disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya, his heart, Yogananda's heart, was restless to find his guru, who would guide him on the spiritual path and enable him to fulfill his divine destiny. So with God's grace, the grace of his Guru, Sri Yukteswar, with his own grace, with his own intentional focus, unwavering focus, and disciplined action, Yogananda became a spiritual master. My Guru, Roy Eugene Davis, an American disciple of Paramahansa Ji, would often explain that Yogananda was called master not because he was a master over other people, but because he was a master of himself. So let's stop right there for a moment. Remember the quote from the beginning. Yogananda said, "Same God is within us all." So imagine being a spiritual master. Imagine that for yourself. To be a true master of yourself. No longer tossed around by a troubled mind, by conditions, by stormy emotions, by old habits. Imagine being a spiritual master, being free to live by the guidance of the soul. Free in this life to do what your higher guidance is prompting you to do. To be able to do that which you are inspired to do and to be able to avoid that which you know you really don't want to do. This is mastery. And if we're serious on the spiritual path, we need to put some good time into imagining this for ourselves. Otherwise, what's the point? You know, where the saints, the lives of the saints are to inspire us to rise up, to express our own potential. And that begins with knowing it's possible for us. And they all say that. But do we say it? Do we say it to ourselves? Do we even imagine it could be possible for us? So let's just get rid of that obstacle. Okay? Just get rid of that one and start envisioning how it could be to be a spiritual master. Spiritual master is one who's established in awareness of the reality of God. They know who they are, and they know who other people are. They can discipline the senses and the mind and live freely from the guidance of the soul. So Mukunda Lal Ghosh, the young man whose heart was on fire for God realization, experienced his heart's desire and became Swami Yogananda in 1915. In 1935, on his return visit to India after teaching in America for 15 years, his guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, bestowed upon him the honorific, the title, Paramahansa. Para means supreme, highest, beyond, transcendent, like we were chanting this morning. Para, para. Hansa means swan. The title signifies a spiritual master, one who is free from the lower drives of the ego, is no longer limited by karma or illusions, living freely in the world in harmony with the infinite. In such a one, right action arises spontaneously as part of living freely in the world. Just the right action comes up and it's done freely. The mythology of the swan is that the swan can drink from milk and extract only the cream, leaving the water and the dross behind. So applied as a title for a spiritual master. A Paramahansa is someone who experiences life in the world but extracts divine bliss from it. A swan lives on the earth but can fly freely through the skies. A spiritual master lives in the world but is not confined by it or to it. Yogananda includes a poem in the Autobiography of a Yogi by Tayu Manavar, a South Indian sage and poet, that points to the heart of mastery. So I want to share that with you. You can control a mad elephant. You can shut the mouth of the bear and the tiger. You can ride a lion. You can play with the cobra. By alchemy, you can eke out your livelihood. You can wander through the universe incognito. You can make vassals of the gods. You can be ever youthful. You can walk on water and live in fire. But control of the mind is better and more difficult. Yogananda, in his autobiography, allows us to accompany him on his soul journey as he searched east and west for holy places and holy people, and he searched his own heart. He was relentless in his search for the highest truth, the direct experience of it, his own personal direct experience of it. He was unrelenting in his focus, unwavering, to be always consciously in the presence of God. So he roamed, but he never roamed as a tourist. He roamed as a pilgrim. As Reverend Sundari was pointing out, our goal for this coming year is to be pilgrims with that unwavering goal to be anchored in the awareness of the presence of God, to be cooperating with the infinite, to be learning how to live in this world in peace and in joy. You know, wherever Yogananda went, the grace of God came to meet him, whether it was in the east, whether it was in the west, whether it was at his guru's ashram or in his own attic meditation room. God's grace came to meet him because that was his focus. He was focused. A Kriya Yogi, a disciple, a master. I'm going to close with a poem by the mystic sage Kabir. This was a version, translation by Robert Bly. Swan, I'd like you to tell me your whole story. Where you first appeared, and what dark sand you are going toward, and where you sleep at night, and what you are looking for. It's morning. Swan, wake up. Climb in the air. Follow me. I know of a country that spiritual flatness does not control, nor constant depression has no place. Where those alive are not afraid to die. There, wildflowers come up through the leafy floor, and the fragrance of I am He floats in the wind. There, the bee of the heart stays deep inside the flower. There, the bee of the heart stays deep inside the flower and cares for no other thing. There, the bee of the heart stays deep inside the flower and cares for no other.